Now? Oh, perfect. Hi, hi out there in High Octane Friends lands. I can't even say the name of our podcast properly because I'm so high in medications, and these are legal antihistamine
prescription
prescription.
medications.
Phoenix in my hand. I didn't know we were starting recording. So to show you all the many hordes of listeners, well, I'm speaking again into the future, that we really have minimal prep here, and it is all to kind of show you this is just who we are. So great things are going to bubble up today because we have one really special and out of Silicon Valley, no less. And I'm going to attempt to pronounce your name right. Divya, I believe, is the pronunciation of your first name, right? But then Raghavan?
You got it right.
Oh, there you go. So who is with Hitachi Ventures. My son thinks I'm so pretentious because I lived in Japan a long time, and so I feel like I have to pronounce it the right way.
I know. I learned it as well after joining. It's Hitachi, not Hitachi. And
Hitachi.
Yeah.
Which is obviously part of a huge, I guess you could say, conglomerate, and you are it's a pretty big fund, I think, Hitachi Ventures, isn't it?
Yep, close to 1 billion in AUM.
There you go.
Wow.
So we're going to get into your backstory and whatnot, and just to remind everybody. Gee whiz, we have 2 MITers and a Harvard dropout, as I was joking today. So a Harvard dropout, that's equivalent to like an MIT master's or PhD, right? Or so I like to kid myself. Anyway, my misspent youth. Trevor, it's been a while, eh, buddy, since this morning when we did our event.
Yes, it's true. Yeah. Well, and then before that, it's just been a busy couple of weeks. So Divya, I just came back from New York Tech Week, which was being run by
A16Z.
And a lot of like places we couldn't get into, or like we were waitlisted, and then some that we got into, and then others that friends got into and just told us where it was, and we just showed up. So
there you go.
That's the best way to do it.
Entrepreneurial chutzpah, I guess.
Well, we had one year where they did like a 2-factor authentication. You had to have the wrist strap and the badge, and so then we just had a line of our we had one extra wristband and badge, and then we would sneak it out. We'd bring it to the back fence, pass it over the back fence to the other guy, then they would come in, and then they passed it.
Serious hustle.
That's the IQ test, right? It was actually all by design. They're just putting this in to let you show your mettle.
How do you keep entrepreneurs out of places you don't? You just account for the loss, right? You just account for the loss.
Like if they weren't like that, if we weren't like that, then you wouldn't have the likes of Uber, which like really shouldn't legally exist in many
Right. Yeah. It's better to ask forgiveness than permission, right? So
That's true.
So I'm going to just randomly ask you a question, Divya, and because every single one, it's almost like roulette here. Completely random question. Do you like the color forest green?
Forest green. Okay.
Yes. Let me be more specific. Do you like metallic forest green? Feel free to say no, it's awful.
Maybe not on a wall, but it depends on where it's applied. Like, if you're asking me for a forest green jacket, maybe not.
No.
But I'm trying to think of in what context it might make sense.
How about on a road?
No, I'll just go with no. I'll just go with no. No.
That's the simple one. So this is really just a way to, introduce you or let you introduce yourself. Tell us your story a little bit. What excites you? What do you really like? And maybe even what do you really not like? What do you avoid? Whether it's work or, anywhere, any other sphere of your life.
Sure. That's I see two questions. One, I'm going to take the chance to introduce myself, just give a little backstory, and then I'll go into your second part, which was about what I like, what I don't like, and I'll try to keep it venture, startup, world specific. But again, we all bring our full selves to work, right? So you might see some personal elements as well there. So my backstory. So I grew up in India. So my story in the US is the classic immigrant story. So I came here for my education, and before I kind of delve into my adult life, I think a big part of my growing up in India was the household which I grew up in. My father was a first generation entrepreneur. And this was back in the 1980s when it was almost a taboo for someone in India to start a company or even think about starting a company. So he and his co-founders, there were three other co-founders, decided to, so they were at this organization called Larsen and Toubron, which was at that point in time, one of the engineering powerhouses. So they were working there, and then decided to start something of their own, which is in the manufacturing space. So I've seen the personal side of entrepreneurship growing up as a child and how much it can kind of move the needle of one's life, and that has kind of been a big element of my entire adult life. So I've always done things or seek to do things which where I can bring my own entrepreneur hat, and also again. So that's my backstory growing up in India. And of course, did my undergrad, everything in India, and moved here for my master's. So I went to University of Florida, Gainesville. If you're familiar with the US football scene, it's one of the go-to schools for that. Of course, I didn't go there for the partying or the football appreciation. I thought football was a 1 hour game, but I didn't realize the clocks get stopped for 4 hours. But anyway, so did my master's in computer science at University of Florida, and then took the path of working in Silicon Valley for a few different companies. Started off on the software engineering side with Citrix, where I built and shipped products, what is today called the desktop virtualization as well as mobile device management offerings. And of course, Citrix is one of those rare companies that was in the core enterprise infrastructure layer, a lot of the VPN, virtualization, etc. So I kind of developed a sense of infrastructure software during my time building and writing code at Citrix. But at the same time, I always had a curiosity of why are we doing this? What's the value in the market, etc. So that curiosity kind of led me down the path of what is called product management, which is at the intersection of engineering and commercial sense, right? So did product management for a few years. I was with a venture-backed startup called Sugar CRM, where I led a lot of their developer-facing capabilities. And then took a break to go to business school. So I went to MIT Sloan. I always joke that Course 15, as it's known within the MIT ecosystem, is like the black sheep within the MIT. But anyway.
That class?
I'm sorry?
Teaches that class?
Well, Course 15 is the degree program for management. So each course... Course means degree program at MIT, and each course has a number, unless you're grad only, in which case you have letters. So when I was there, I started out as as BEH, Bioengineering and Environmental Health, and then after I left, it became a full graduate and undergraduate course and became Course 20. So
okay, because I took some courses at MIT, even though I was down the street, and they were 1500 something. So it was true.
That's the management school, which is kind of an anomaly in in a school like MIT, which specializes in engineering, core engineering. Yes, so that's why I call us the black sheep of the MIT list of courses.
But there was. Did you ever go to the Muddy Charles pub?
Yes, I do.
Yes,
Yeah.
So the number of startups that have emerged from the Muddy Charles pub, given that it was sort of equidistant from the engineering school and from the business school.
Yep. Yeah, meet in the middle. Literally.
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. But fun times, like,
Mhm.
so went to MIT Sloan. And also then once during my time at Sloan, it was a little bit of an exploration of what I wanted to do. I think like any classic business school. At the same time, I started working with a bunch of startups, like helping them think through, wearing my product management hat. And
Mhm.
I really enjoyed working with early stage companies, just thinking about, how do you think about your strategy? How do you think about early commercialization, etc. And in the process, I kind of stumbled with a couple of VC internships. Like, so my path into VC was mainly through a bunch of internships. And I really enjoyed the 1,000 feet overview of landscape that you get sitting in the VC ecosystem. Also, your ability to roll up your sleeves and, help out early stage companies. At the same time, like you're part of the investing muscle is a relatively new one. I didn't get into VC because of hey, I wanted to invest in startups. It was mainly out of a curiosity to work with early stage companies. And one thing led to another, and I joined NGP Capital, which is an early growth fund focused on Series Bs and beyond. Did a bunch of investments, including Coda, which is got acquired by Grammarly, and Immuta, which is in the data governance space, and a bunch of others. And at the same time, wanted to go earlier and earlier, and decided to join the Hitachi Ventures team, which is more focused on seed and Series A's. Again, investing in early stage companies that have more of a software flavor to it. I think we're all questioning what software means, especially with this whole code gen and likes. But at the same time, I do feel that we are at a unique point in time where the entire interface of software and how humans interact with software is going to shift dramatically, right?
Yes.
So that continues to excite me from a investing lens standpoint. And that's a gist about my background.
Very cool. Oh, that's wonderful.
I think that's the best introduction we've had yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And so you said you worked. So you worked both with startups and then internships with VCs?
VCs? Yeah. So,
I mean, maybe I can ask what was different about those two experiences, right? Like, I guess the VC, you're looking at it more from a due diligence perspective versus the startup, you're actually working on whatever problem you're wanting to solve, something like that?
Yeah. Something of that. Like, I mean, again, with startups, it's more of like, hey, this is an operational challenge that you need to address. Like, and largely, again, in my capacity, I was mainly like helping think through positioning, right? Like, how do you kind of think about positioning, right? But at the same time, on the VC side, of course, I think maybe a funny story to share here. So the first VC conversation that I had no idea what this whole field was about. I just showed up. And one thing I learned early in my career, when you show up to these unstructured, you don't know what to expect type of work situations, it's nice to kind of come with your own structure so that you can control the narrative, control the conversation in some shape or the other.
Makes sense.
So I did this entire a mini deep dive into this enterprise chatbot space. This was back in 2017, 2018 timeframe where chatbots were a big thing. And this was incidentally with a VC fund in New York that had all the finance muscle of how to think about investments, but they didn't have the technical muscle of how do you kind of assess technology, right? What's good. So I kind of went with my own flavor of, hey, this is how you should be thinking about it from a technical standpoint, and then try to marry it from a high level strategy. And I think that kind of impressed the folks on the other side, and that's how I mean, basically I was.
Right, I'm betting a lot of them couldn't do it. They didn't understand the technical aspects.
That's what I reckon. I mean, again, I got lucky there. I don't know if there was any science to it, but I just recognized the audience in the room, and I know that these people were, investment bankers. And again, this was because I was in New York City and I had the proximity of, dealing. I knew that these investment bankers essentially didn't or consulting background folks didn't have the muscle to be able to understand, hey, this open source technology could disrupt XYZ or whatever, right? So just use that, whereas this was something which I knew intimately well. So I just used that, unique, whatever value add I could bring to the table to land an internship. So.
Great. So I have a question. So now that you're at Hitachi Ventures, I mean, you were more growth stage, and now I think you said you're pre-seed or seed to Series A. So anyway, earlier stage, especially when you're at like the seed and pre-seed stages, how do you find these companies? Like, do you just kind of cast a wide net, or do you have to go and look in specific spots? Like, I don't want to lead your answer, but how do you do that? How do you find these jewels?
Yeah, so I'm going to share firstly, just some macro background in terms of when I started in VC, right? So firstly, I started in the 2020 timeframe. And between 2020 and 2026, the last 6 years, actually, the VC landscape has gone through a tremendous shift in many different directions. This wasn't, the pace at which things have shifted in the last 6 years is much more than what happened in the last, in the 2010 to 2020 decade, or, even before. So let me kind of elaborate what I mean by that. Firstly, I think in the 2021 timeframe, because of COVID accelerated digital transformation, there was tremendous amount of capital that flew into or came into the VC space. So just to kind of give you, it almost increased 5x between 2020 and 2021, and we saw a lot of crazy deal making. I was seeing this, firsthand. I could feel this, in my first 2 years of VC. There's so much deal making that traditionally, you, as an investor, you kind of take time. You do your due diligence. You know what you're getting into, but that wasn't the case where the whole Tiger Global led, deal making pace, right? So that was one big change. And then, of course, in 2023, early 2024, there was the big, ChatGPT and the whole AI landscape kind of shifted. And, now we are in the midst of an AI revolution. So I think these were two different macro incidents that happened even in my short span of 6 years, or in VC, which have kind of played a tremendous role in terms of how I have been personally experiencing and thinking about investing as such. So Rob, to your question about how do you find early stage companies, initially when I started out, I think it was a general knowledge or general attempt, at least if you're at a slightly growth stage, but I would say Series Bs, you took a very thematic approach or a thesis driven approach. So you studied the landscape, you went and met every different companies, developed a sense of what a good, better, best looked like, and then kind of, invested in one, right? That was the initial, and I still continue to, do thesis building and, but also the tech has become so fluid, even if you just take the AI landscape, things are shifting so quickly that it almost becomes a huge challenge to think about, what will you build? If you build a thesis today, it is going to get outdated within the next month or two, right? So what does this mean? So I think myself and the broader industry as a whole has kind of shifted to a very, very network driven, let's find the best founders, best, talent, very, very early on in the cycle, invest in a relationship. So I typically invest in seed and Series A's. So I do want to kind of have some head start in terms of, relationship building. But at the same time, I do know of plenty of other funds who just kind of, invest just in the talent. If they just see X OpenAI or X Anthropic, they're okay to kind of write checks, right? So I think it's become very, very network driven. I think every VC fund out there is soaking in sourcing and soaking in, or rather not soaking in, but rather want to kind of source aggressively. And again, I think what has this actually reminds me of Charlie Munger's one of axioms, that the job of an entrepreneur is to weave a web of seamless, well-deserved trust, right? So similarly, for a job of a VC is kind of become, you have to weave your own web of well-deserved trust, and then your natural deal exchanges starts happening from that. So that's what's that's to your question. How do you find? Like, I'm trying to weave my own web of trust, which includes working with high quality founders, working with industry leaders, and working with folks generally within my network, and trying to place them in interesting companies which I think are rocket ships. And that I'm hoping would create like a seamless web of trust, which in turn turns into a sourcing funnel in some ways.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm gonna give you a minute to speak, Trevor, because like usually I'm not short of speaking, but I'm a little normal today, given
Divya, we've talked about the concept of the speaking stick, and so you pass the speaking stick over, and then it's
a little harder virtually.
Virtually, yeah.
No, that's really, really interesting. So I think I love the concept of sort of this growing ecosystem. And I think that's actually something that we struggle with in Canada is we end up losing for one or more reasons. Usually the reasons are fairly straightforward. There's more money in Silicon Valley. If you're raising above a certain amount, you're going to need to go down there. And so we do have a bit of a one-way ticket of companies that start up here that raise up to a certain amount and then that go down to Silicon Valley or New York or Austin or one of the hubs and continue to sort of raise funds. And I mean, like, to the extent that my startup was in New York this past week and we just participated in the pitch last night. So what do you have any recommendations when it comes to trying to encourage people to stay, let's say, in Canada, despite the I don't know if it's challenges or opportunity, despite other opportunities that exist elsewhere, and to sort of try and offset that brain drain that we are subject to. So
if I've understood your question correctly, so what are some ways to kind of keep the startup in Canada, but at the same time, continue executing, or what are some?
Yes. Like we still want to. I mean, there's a bunch of questions in here that I could ask, but I think the two that I think about the most are sort of people and talent and and sort of growing the ecosystem. I think there's a small list of unicorns that have formed and stayed in Canada, right? Shopify is the one that pops to mind, right? There's a few others, Wealthsimple, I think. There's a few small ones or not small.
Cohere for that matter.
Cohere.
Like Cohere
yes. No, absolutely. And so there are, but we're what's the way to say it? We're punching below our weight class.
Sure.
We could have a bigger infrastructure. We could have a bigger economic infrastructure here for startups specifically. We could be. There's certainly lots of things we could be doing. We could be supporting startups more. We could be supporting startup founders more. But the one thing that people keep referring to, and I don't know if I've heard it so much from the policymakers, but certainly from I mean, even Rob, right? TechTO. We had a tech. There's a Toronto-based tech scene, and there's a sort of nonprofit company called TechTO that runs like a monthly event, has been running it for about 10 years now. That's just a get together of different people, and one of the recent ones was getting your company prepared for Y Combinator, and there was a big controversy that came up where they said they would not accept any more. They wouldn't accept companies that were incorporated in outside,
outside of US, yeah.
outside of the US.
Yeah, this was Gary Tan, right? Who's the CEO.
Yes.
Who, incidentally, as you may know, Divya, is actually a Canadian. So frankly, shame on Gary.
I did not know that. Okay.
So so it caused sort of a small tempest within the teapot here of like, oh God, and then to the point where they actually went back on it. They rescinded whatever the thing was, but it's still the case that that we do end up losing a lot of companies south of the border, and that hurts for two reasons. One is that of course that revenue goes away, but more importantly, those talented serial founders, right, sort of also leave, and I think that's what we lack in Canada, at least outside of maybe fintech, not as much, because there's more fintech companies up here, because at least in Toronto, because it's the financial capital. But like there is a gap. There's a definite gap, and what are your thoughts as to maybe some ways of combating that?
Sure. So let me share my perspective. And again, I want to caveat saying that I have lived, and worked primarily in the US. So, but I have also kind of lived in a few different places to be able to observe the differences. And so I've lived in the Valley, and I've also lived in New York City and Boston, right? And even within these three places, which to a certain extent, there is startup concentration in all of these different places. I feel like the Silicon Valley ecosystem is almost 10 to 20x, on steroids than, what New York or Boston is, right? And I used to joke that it is Silicon Alley in New York versus Silicon Valley, right? So, and that's not a dig on, the tech capabilities of New York or Boston or for Canada for that matter, right? I think I'm sure you know this, but there is a network effect that kind of sits here in the Valley, which is almost impossible to replicate anywhere else. And it's the same in some ways that Wall Street, you see this network effect of people, bankers chatting in a bar and, talking about deals and talking about pricing, etc. The same thing happens here in the Valley where people are talking about code or what's the next, best thing. And it's not a one-to-one comparison on the quality of the technology in any shape or form. It's just that natural ecosystem of sharing and knowledge sharing and people kind of willing to participate in that ecosystem development, that's very hard to replicate anywhere outside the Valley. And if someone is able to replicate that, that's good. But that's kind of becomes organically here in the Valley, and it's just probably a function of how things are set up here, right?
Right.
So I think, what does this mean for startups who are emerging out of Canada? I think there are two things here. One is you have to kind of separate out fundraising from startup building, right? I think you can't conflate the two together. And I've seen this in plenty of cross-border, founders who've done this successfully, say coming out of the Indian ecosystem, India-US cross-border, or Israel-US cross-border, which is and then, even with some Canadian startups. I think for the management team, at least in the early days, it's recommended that you stay close to the geo for which you're the market that you're building the market, product for, right? So building for. So that's certainly there. But then from a fundraising standpoint, I've also seen founders kind of, decouple the startup building. They can go build the startup anywhere, whether it's in Canada, whether it's in, India or Israel or so. But from a fundraising standpoint, I think it just makes a lot of sense to kind of participate in this Valley ecosystem, just because these connections, the fundraising tends to kind of work in a little bit of a warm introduction, organic way. Of course, your early VCs can help you and people can intro, but for someone as an outsider to kind of get started with the fundraising, you have to kind of spend time in this ecosystem and get to know people, and that's where the giving aspect of Silicon Valley starts playing into coming into play, where people are very forthcoming in terms of introductions, etc., etc. So I think as a general, lens of viewing Canadian companies as a VC, I don't think I would hold it against them that they're geographically in Canada, hence I wouldn't invest. Actually, it's a geographical advantage that you're not in the valley, especially from a valuation perspective, entry price, etc., etc. Still look for the fundamentals, which is how is the founder in terms of how he or she is thinking about the product, the go-to-market lens, and how astute they are in terms of being able to navigate the uncertainties. That's of course, and then of course, given the type of companies that I invest in, I always look for deeply technical talent that how they're able to surround that. That's true whether you're from Stanford or whether you're from the Canadian Waterloo ecosystem, But and of course, there's the early commercialization. How are they what are customers thinking about? So those fundamentals remain the same, and it's not influenced by the geographical location of the startup. But there's another element which I do evaluate in founders, which is like their ability to go fundraise, because I don't want to be the only VC who's funding them, because I'm constrained in terms of how much capital I can deploy. So what is the fundraising? And that's a skill that you can kind of develop by staying in this Valley ecosystem, along, and you kind of pick it up.
Yes. Is it a matter of just doing a lot more pitches primarily to learn that sort of skill, you think, as an entrepreneur, as a founder?
So it's not just about pitching. There's a lot that goes behind that. You need to be able to kind of read the room, manage timelines, because each VC is working with their own timelines. I have, as much as I would like to give white glove service to each and every founder that I'm interested in moving forward. But at the same time, given the volume of startups that have kind of exploded, there are 10 other companies in my pipeline itself. So then from a founder's perspective, they need to know how to kind of run a process it's a skill that you learn along. So syndicate construction and fundraising is a very intense, game of poker, if I may say, both on the VC and more importantly on the founder side. I do empathize how hard it is, but this is a game that you have to learn at the end of the day.
Yes. Yeah. Well, interesting. Yeah, no, I think that's actually quite helpful. I think that the one thing I took away from that is that learning how to fundraise, right, is a critical skill that doesn't require geography, but that does require kind of, and so, it requires you learning the language, essentially, right?
So and how do you learn the language? So that's where my advice of spending time in the Valley ecosystem, because you just organically bump into other founders One thing I've observed is on the founders side is there's an unsaid brotherhood / sisterhood where everyone's supporting each other, and you learn this along the way,
No, yeah, I think definitely there's a a look of knowledge, when you're speaking with other founders in terms of okay, you've been through
this and you learn that. Yeah.
And a shared sympathy.
A shared sympathy. I can VCs also deserve some sympathy, but I'm sure
Well,
anyway.
Sympathy for the founder and for their spouses. They're very patient spouses.
Exactly.
when they are married,
yeah.
So Divya, would this week that you just perhaps completed largely, if not fully, would this week be a typical sort of week for you? Can you explain what a sort of typical week might be for someone like you?
That's a good question.
Or is it always changing?
It is changing. It's very cyclical, I would say. So I would say if I kind of just break down the 3 key, or rather 4 key tasks that I have to kind of juggle, right? So one is, of course, sourcing, which is trying to find interesting companies, and tied to it is also what we call as thesis building. So having some view of where to look for, where to hunt, etc. Sometimes it can be, very intense in terms of thesis building, where you're talking to folks, you're trying to gather insights. I think like VCs in some ways is a you're shepherding insights, right? Like, so that's so you have to kind of put yourself out there, let people know that you're thinking within my own circle about what areas I'm hunting, and get, hey, have you seen this? So I think sourcing and thesis building is kind of what two key aspects. The third big aspect is, okay, you've sourced, you've met like company meetings. I at least meet like at least 7 companies per week, like, if not more. So I think evaluating those pitches and trying to see which of these make sense to go to the next level, etc. So that continues to happen regardless of the various phases. And the third phase, I would say, is in the rabbit hole. So I like something, I sense a deal, I want to kind of build that conviction, and then kind of, so that's the, deal rabbit hole, where there's a lot of different elements associated with it. One is, of course, once I like something, I'm kind of trying to kind of build relationship with founder and try to see, is this beyond liking a product or a market that they're building? Like, is this a founder that I can work with? So there's a lot of work that goes into that relationship building. Then there is the bigger piece here of, investment case. So where I have to kind of convince my team why this is a good company to go after, right? Like, so there's a lot of work that goes to the investment building case. And I think the part which isn't spoken, and this goes to my comment of VCs deserve sympathy as well, is the winning phase, like, where, of course, if it's a founder that, you like, there's, and the market, the capital markets and the VC market is incredibly efficient. So I'm sure if I'm chasing the founder, there are either 10 other VCs who are chasing the founder as well, so this is where the winning aspect kind of, like the deal making aspect kind of comes into play, like, so where it's not just enough that I give a term sheet or I ask for a certain allocation. It's also important that I get what I ask for. Like, and that's where, like, founders, as you're constructing a round, like, I sympathize that there's a tremendous amount of pressure in terms of managing that syndicate. You have to cut people down, like, hey, someone asked for like 7 million allocation, but you have to bring them down to 2, and I need to on the other end be willing to kind of take that 2, like, whereas I first pitch you for a 7 and whatever, like, so there's a lot of song and dance that happens and as part of the deal making, which also takes up a significant amount of time, right? Like, and that's where this is the competitor sport aspect of VC kind of comes into play. You have to kind of use every tool in your arsenal to kind of go get what you want in some ways. Once you've made up your mind that you like something, like a company, it, right? Like, and then, of course, like, there's a big part of which is also portfolio management. It's like a flywheel in some ways, right? So, okay, I've invested in the company, I can't leave them. Of course, the best founders and companies, of course, there's a lot of fires that you deal with. And, one part of, founder evaluation is how much of a fire can this person or the founding team handle on their own versus when you require outside intervention. But the best VCs always serve as a sounding board. So, whether it's a key talent hiring or some, next fundraising, how do you kind of tackle, prepare your data room, etc., for your next round, or some positioning and, some recent product developments, and they want to help you think through some, and I will, think through positioning or some go-to-market, this thing. So I think, and of course, like, there's also the implicit value add. I'm always looking out for my portfolio companies in terms of, how I can help them, whether it's in my own capacity or by connecting them with the best folks that I know within my network who can be helpful to them. So that's the portfolio management aspect. So I think, Rob, to your question, like, every week kind of requires, 80% or rather 70% of one aspect of these different things that I described, like, and the rest 30% is dedicated, split between the rest of the, pie. So every week is different, like, so it greatly depends. So at least this last week,
I guess it depends where in the cycle you're at.
Where in the cycle you are.
Yeah. And I was glad to meet you in Toronto. I'm glad that you're coming up for things like clearly you know about the Vector Institute, which is like co-founded by Jeffrey Hinton and people like that. So this is one of the premier I think, AI institutes in the world. And
Yep.
but it's nice to have people like you recognize that and coming up here. And I dare say that it won't be too long before the administration south of the border changes, such that we can all be friends again.
I'm not going to comment. I'm like you mentioned
I'm
in
not
the
gonna say- I'm not-
outside of the outset of the podcast that you would edit stuff like
No, I
or
know.
you don't edit stuff.
The point is,
So,
what I'm trying to make is that we want to come closer together, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm happy that these sorts of things happen.
Well, and
Yep.
and there's still a lot going on.
Yep.
You know, I think there's politics can only inject itself so much, and
yep, exactly. I mean,
yeah.
again, markets are incredibly efficient, like,
Right,
so if
right.
and innovation, if like wherever it is, like if dollars are going to flow, dollars or US or
Yes.
Canadian dollars is going to flow,
It's
like,
gonna flow,
so
for sure.
yes.
Speaking of flows and the where and to whom and to where, you're from India originally. What about India? Because I know when we were talking about Canada before, it's like, oh, Canada experienced a brain drain. But of course, we're not the only ones. We just happen to be your neighbors or one of your neighbors. But I think of India too, and there's so much talent there.
Yep.
And like, can you tell us a little bit about what you think about India right now and Indian entrepreneurs in particular? Like, and are there cases that you know of where maybe some Indian founders go to the US, they build, maybe even they start building a company there, but they go back to India? Does that happen much? Have you seen that?
A few instances, I think. Firstly, like, I just want to acknowledge again, speaking of the administration or so, like, so the way I came to the country was through a F1 visa, which is a student visa, and then I converted into what is called the H1B visa, which is the highly skilled worker visa, right?
Yes.
And as having gone through the rite of passage of H1B and the whole permanent residency process, et cetera, I can certainly empathize the long waiting queues for H1B, which can kind of inhibit a lot of entrepreneurial dreams, right? Like, so because your H1 requires you to be sponsored by a stable employer, right? Like, and but of course there are hacks these days to kind of get past that. If you really want to start something, like, you can always switch visa status, etc. But it is a huge risk that a lot of folks from India are taking, or rather on standby, not taking the risk as well, like, because of this visa issues. I think what we're going through right now is a little bit of the cleanup of the H1B system. There's a lot of repercussions that we're seeing right now, and I'm hoping that it will start settling soon, and it'll continue to kind of revert back to the original intent of why this whole visa was created, which is to kind of attract the best of the talent from outside of the world, right?
Yes. I mean, like, there definitely are companies that are abusing the H1B system.
Exactly.
And there can be reforms made to it, and hopefully these reforms are on the right path towards getting back there. Yeah, I mean, there's a Canadian skilled workers process as well, and fraught with many of the same problems. Like, you have to, the company has to be around for a certain number of years before it can sponsor people, and there's other rules, and so we're actually tackling this ourselves with our own employees and co-founders who are students who are on a student visa. And so it's that's certainly not just a US problem.
That's the US thing.
Problem.
Yeah.
It's never a problem. Absolutely.
And Canada grew particularly quickly, even during COVID and after COVID, because, like, we had a labor shortage in many of these industries, and unfortunately the government, I don't know, through their wisdom or lack thereof, or just like, it's just too hard a problem when you're bringing in people suddenly, but you don't plan to or are not capable of building the infrastructure around that, like housing for people, or upgrading your healthcare system, and then suddenly people cannot get a family doctor or any kind of service. And one of the negative effects of not building that infrastructure to support new people coming in, so many people coming into the country, that it's turned a country that until like maybe 6 or 7 years ago was super pro. Like pretty much everybody was pro immigrant. And now you've got these really vociferous kind of people who are like, frankly, it's very unfortunate. And you know, you've got a rise of racism, I think, here. You may see that in the US, a lot of countries, right? It's just I hope that I think we are turning the corner on that, so those people can just kind of meaning the negative voices, like shut up and we'll deal with it. But like, you know, it's affected cities like Toronto, for example, as you may know well, having been here. Very expensive. I was in Sydney last week, and it's even more expensive in Sydney, for goodness sake. And yeah, I think it is symptomatic of globalization in general. It's, you know, like you said, the efficiency of capital will go, you know, whether those are individual retail flows of money and people investing their own money, or it's, you know, people like yourself at venture capital, PE firms or Wall Street firms. That's going to happen. But we need to sort of figure this out, because otherwise it's kind of going to rip away a lot of the great things that I think globalization has brought. The silver lining I see in a lot of the tumult, if you will, nowadays that's been happening, is that I think you're going to get some strengthening of alliances. Like you'll look, even from a defense standpoint, like NATO. NATO I think will be better for this in the next 5 or 10 years, notwithstanding the government du jour, wherever. And I think just in terms of countries moving together, like I was going to say, Europe, like,
well, Europe and Canada are talking about like extending cooperation and extending alliances, and that's relatively new, you know, and there are other interesting things that have emerged as well. I think the one thought I had when it relates to this kind of stuff is just the silent majority. You know, I think we've talked about this before, Rob, right? There is a silent majority of people that don't think immigration is bad, that think that, and,
right.
And if you, I mean, I was, again, there in the States, and I am a U.S. citizen. And,
you're an immigrant.
You know, I'm a double immigrant. So I'm originally South African, moved to Buffalo, New York, and then went to MIT, and then came up to Toronto. And now I'm dual U.S. Canadian citizen, and you know, it just, I mean, I was talking about this with friends this week, or new friends that I just met, and you know, there's a lot more. So there's of course there's a vocal minority of anti-immigrant people that are supporting the Trump camp. Right?
Very
but there is a much larger silent majority of people who are sons of immigrants and daughters of immigrants and immigrants themselves. And you know, it's not outside of the realm of possibility to say, hey, you know, everyone who supports immigration, why don't we get together and form our own political party or whatever it is, and say, we're enough of this, enough of, you know, enough of these billionaires that are laying the blame of everything wrong with society on those poor, hardworking immigrants that are actually helping this country. You know, like anyway, sorry, it's a bit of a soapbox.
Well, I don't think we can solve for it in this.
No. It's a bit of a soapbox, but I think it raises the point that maybe we need to not be the not as silent majority. You know, maybe we need to say that there's a good thing. I mean, my mom, when she, like, so again, my family emigrated when I think when my dad was 40, and when in 1990, and you know, so like I have all of the respect in the world for my parents, you know, picking up everything, leaving everything they knew, coming to a new country, starting over with, like, you know, 13 and 10-year-old kid, and I think it's you know, as difficult a process as that was, it gives you a perspective on the country that you live in that's different from other people, and it gives you, you know, and I mean, like, there's a reason, right? There's also a reason that many of the entrepreneurs that we know are immigrants, because it's the same sort of thing. You're starting over, you're starting new. You have to kind of assemble together your own support system and your own thing, and you know, like, actually immigrating is something that that gives you at least the, if not the skills, then at least the knowledge that you can do it, right? The knowledge that you can do it.
Say, Trevor, a couple of things. One is, I think it's kind of like sink or swim, right? So you suddenly you're faced with this, and you learn through that, and you succeed kind of one way or another. You muddle through because you have to. But secondly, anybody who's willing to go to another country for a long time, and I even would count to a lesser extent than you two, myself. Like, I went off and not knowing much about Japan. I lived in Tokyo for 5 years. But anybody who certainly goes and immigrates to a country, I think it selects for a certain kind of person in many cases. They're that person, kind of person who's a risk taker. That's kind of a big risk. Unless, like, you're fleeing war, you're a refugee from that, then like you're just trying to survive. But
yeah, but you've done enough to say, I want to get out of here, and you've made that happen as well. You know, so yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, I was heartened by the number of Ukrainian refugees that have started companies. You know, like, I saw a bunch of them last week. Like, there's two that are and one of them is a good friend of mine, because he's a stand-up comedian as well as a you know, startup founder, and I am too, very, very, very amateur. Nothing, none of my sets are sort of worthy enough of putting out there, but you know, like, it's Oleg, and he's amazingly positive for all of the stuff he's been through, you know, and just he's putting together a company that helps other companies to grow and set up and establish. So
I don't have any real connection to Ukraine, but I support them. And it seems a bit weird to say this. It's like a couple of days ago when I met this young woman, I was telling her, like, I'm super impressed by, like, super confident, but just in general about, like, Ukrainians. I'm proud of them for standing up to, like, such a huge military and their whole commitment. But I have just as you mentioned it now, last week when I was in Sydney, because we all so the company I work for, as you know, it's a global growth advisory. It's based out of Australia. So we all had our offsite. A lot of us kind of flew in from around the world to Sydney. And that was a bucket list thing for me. I'd never been to Australia, so I was super happy about it. But the most amazing thing about that trip is that I guess he's the managing director for EMEA for us. He's based in London, Rob Jeffries. And his, like, it's for someone coming, like, from Toronto, for example, or people came in from elsewhere in the US and all over the globe. It's a long journey, as you know, but for Rob, it was particularly long. And he came in via Ukraine, and it was a very long, convoluted journey for him, but he had spent 2 weeks there supporting his girlfriend/wife. So I just think that's amazing. And in fact, he was walking around, and they basically automatically tried to conscript him into the army. And so I think they put him on the truck and everything. And luckily he was able to get out of it because he happened to be able to find his British passport. But otherwise, going, like, they were going to the front lines, and, like, that's amazing. Like, someone would do that.
Wow.
Right?
It's a crazy story.
It's amazing. This is what love will do, you know.
Buried the lead there. Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, I was and then he's like, "How are you doing?" And he started telling us a story. I'm like, "What?"
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. When you start asking people how their day is, you should be prepared sometimes to find out. Wow.
It's not small talk all time, right?
Yes.
Sometimes we just want to download.
Yeah.
So you know, thank you so much for coming on our podcast, Divya. This is really terrific, and, you know, hopefully we can all meet up in your neck of the woods. You're in Palo Alto, right? So
Yes.
maybe we can go there. We speaking of going there, so we just recently, a guy I met last week again. His name is Mitsu. I gotta get this right. I've forgotten most of my Japanese. For the Japanese in the audience, Anyway, so Mitsuishi Go-san is our new partner for Japan, because that's a big market for us. But of course, if you're at Hitachi Ventures, the mothership being there, so we might be in your neck of the woods soon. So we'll maybe drop by and say hello. But thank you so much for coming on our podcast. This is an honor to have someone like you on here. And I'm glad you guys didn't take the whole time and just like try to, unsuccessfully it would be, but to try and make me feel small because, you know, having two MITers gang up on me, which has happened before. You should go back and maybe listen to one of our podcasts with our friend Nadine Miller, who's fantastic. And not only is she an MIT alum, she's also a U of T engineer and Oxford MBA. So, and she's done fabulously well. And she's, we'll introduce you to her at some point, because after I guess, you know, doing very well as a mining executive, she's now, what would you term it, Trevor? And what's the name? Can we say the name of it even? Did she say?
Yeah, it's Nightingale. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So she's building a new, she's on a couple boards of mining companies. She had an article written about her, The Empress of Mining, which is a lot of fun to read.
She bought a tiara,
yes,
a real tiara.
With an actual real tiara with diamonds.
I'm going to look this up right after we hang up here.
She's the best.
And, she's great. And but she started a company that's really grown out of an experience she had, which is that her father and her partner's father are getting old and need support. And so she's built this sort of smart house system that can keep her informed as to, you know, like that everything's okay with her dad, or she has the ability to kind of check in on him when he's living at home, but like with her, but she's traveling the world. So very interesting.
There's a lot going on in the whole aging tech.
It's only going to get bigger, right?
It's only going to get bigger. Yeah, I'm sure the MIT actually has a lab called the Aging Lab, and there's it's called The Aging Economy. That's the book written by so it's just interesting to see all the research being done into different aspects of aging.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Didn't they am I getting this wrong? Didn't they used to call that gerontology, or is gerontology not aging? It's like you've already aged and then they're trying to, is that?
It could be, it sounds vaguely familiar, but
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Change.
Cool.
Anyway,
thank you for having me, Rob and Trevor. It was great to kind of convert a serendipitous interaction with you, Rob, into an interesting podcast. So I look forward to staying in touch, and
for sure.
Of course, do let me know if you're in the Palo Alto area, or if I'm in Toronto.
Yes. Please come back to Canada. We want more people.
Will do. Yes, absolutely. I'm just waiting for the weather to get better. Right?
No, you would love it.
I know it is. Yeah, I'm sure. Because even just a few weeks back when I was there, like I forgot that coming from California, I forgot my jacket. And I was like freezing in the heat.
Yeah, but before we go, I gotta say, I was in Sunnyvale some years ago. Like maybe this is 6 years ago, just before the pandemic, and I was working for a fintech at the time. And we got into the Plug and Play Tech Center, right? So I was on the rooftop of the Plug and Play Tech Center there in Sunnyvale, and I was meeting with a very important corporate VC. And I had stupidly, it just come, I think it was like late February, maybe early March, and it was cold in Toronto. Like it was definitely like freezing. But I just brought a light jacket, and I thought that would be sufficient. And it's not like I hadn't been there in that neck of the woods before I had. But I'm talking to this guy, a very important conversation. And I am not kidding. I was like almost violently shaking for the whole half hour. And at the end, I was saying, I wonder if you noticed. I'm like, so I thought, I should apologize. I apologize for I've been shivering. He's like, yeah, I noticed. I see the whole time. I was like, oh my God. but that just makes you more human, I guess, right?
Yeah,
So-
yeah. I mean, I think the one thing which I don't know about Toronto summer evenings, but the one thing that I miss about Boston and New York, for that matter, is the warm summer evenings.
Oh yeah.
Which you will not find it here in the Bay Area. It can get like very hot during the day and then like very cold in the night.
Cold at night. Yeah.
Well, we have those.
The coldest winter I ever spent was the summer in San Francisco.
Somebody told me it's an Oscar Wilde quote, but it's not an Oscar Wilde quote. But
It's Mark Twain.
Mark Twain. Okay.
Oh,
okay.
is it?
I don't know if he's been. Okay. Okay. Never mind. You might be right.
All right.
Cool.
Okay, well,
All right.
Thank you. And, thank you to all our, I like to say, the hordes of High Octane Friends listeners. Temporally speaking, time shifting here, of course, but our audience has been growing. We've got a several episode recordings that we've done recently, and we've been busy, so we have a little bit of a backlog. So it might be a week or two before we get yours out, Divya, but we'll let you know. So again, thank you, and good night, good day.
Have a good weekend.
Okay.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah. Bye.